Thank you so much, Lucy, for giving me your time and giving me this opportunity to finally get you on the podcast. It's been a journey to obviously have our schedules match up, and I really appreciate you getting on the show today.
Great, Vivek. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Lucy, I know you from obviously our previous workplace where I used to work very closely with you. But for the audience who may not know you, can you just a little bit give introduction on who are you, what's your journey, and give a little context to the conversations that we are going to have today?
So, hello, my name is Lucy Howie. I'm a New Zealander living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. So, I'm now the co-founder of a company called Quan, but before that I've been through 10 countries in numerous roles ranging from business strategies, tech startup CEO, executive at a unicorn to land here. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. And as you said, you're the co-founder of Quan. Share a little bit about what Quan is and what's its mission.
Sure. So Quan, we're a startup, wellbeing startup based in the Netherlands. So our mission is to place wellbeing at the heart of success. We are an end-to-end platform to improve team and individual performance by assessing the underlying causes and then matching to the right solutions.
Wow. I think it's basically solving a problem quite contemporary to the times that we are living in. Can you give us a little bit view on what led up to having you starting the company Quan?
Sure. So Quan, I'm the co-founder with my amazing sort of partner, Arusha. How it all really started is I met Arusha 5 years ago. We were both living in Amsterdam. I was the CEO of a tech startup and I was presenting on a stage, and a woman came up to me and said, "You have such a complementary cognitive profile to this woman, Arusha. I need to introduce you." So she was an organizational psychologist who has a business in psychometric testing. And Arusha was really working in the space of team performance and culture and well-being. So she introduced us. It turns out we were working in the same building and we really hit it off, actually, from the first coffee. So we met up regularly. And Arusha had this idea about this well-being assessment and how can we make sure that we measure well-being as a key measurement that against financial KPIs, engagement KPIs, and ensure that the cost of success is not employee well-being. So she came to me in Berlin. We did a kind of business model canvas session on my windows with post-it notes, and turns out it should really be a platform. And then I think the week after, COVID was happening, and then the week after, Arusha did a pitch of the idea to the Red Cross, and they said, "Can you roll it out to our 20,000 volunteers?" And we said, "Okay, this has got some legs." So that's really how the whole thing started.
Wow, that's a very interesting origin story of Quan.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you felt when you heard about this problem that your other co-founder Arushi was trying to solve. What was so enticing about this problem space for yourself that brought you to start this company with her?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So my background, my undergraduate was in exercise science. Believe it or not, I've never used it. I've since done an MBA, but so I have a strong interest in sort of health and well-being. But coming through my journey of being the startup CEO, where I was really experienced burnout firsthand, through to working in other companies and seeing where the cost of success is employee well-being, I understood it's a huge problem that wasn't really being solved properly, not below perk level, and it's something that I'm passionate about. I mean, we're wanting to create a movement, and that's what we're doing. So it's been 2 years. We've now got, it's been quite a journey. Over that 2 years, we spent a lot of time researching, so 500 user interviews. We did sessions with about 80 teams. Then before we built our beta product, we got into YCombinator, which is one of the best accelerators in the world in Silicon Valley. So it's been quite a journey since then, actually.
Wow. I think it would be very interesting to also cover like not just the good parts, but also the hard parts. Maybe we spend a little bit of time on the good parts. So
sure.
You mentioned about getting into Y Combinator, and I think it was a great moment. And I think it'll be interesting for people to learn about how was your journey applying and getting into Y Combinator.
That's a very good question. So up until applying for Y Combinator, we had a core team of 8 people who are amazing, but working to next to nothing off an investment of total 200,000, which doesn't get you very far, as you would know. So we were doing a lot with a little, and this is where we were really using it to do deep understanding of the problem space and user research and prototyping and iterating. We were coming to the end of the line, basically. We applied, as in running out of money and options. We on the week leading up to the 2 weeks leading up to Y Combinator, I think we had 2 term sheets and a merger offer.
Wow.
Which is, I know, kind of a crazy time, but the other options were not right, and then Y Combinator happened, and then a lot changed for us after that in terms of the valuation of the company, with the investment we're able to get in. So it was really, I remember taking a walk with Arusha around the block, thinking, what's going to be the next step, but the path materialized because we really trust in what we're doing, and we will find a way, and the path was Y Combinator. Yeah.
Brilliant. It would be also I'm quite curious again to hear how was your experience in that journey through Y Combinator, obviously subject to what you could share with us in this forum, but it'll be very interesting for also budding entrepreneurs and companies who are also in the same bucket, looking at opportunities for them to accelerate.
Sure. So Y Combinator, we didn't actually know that much about it. We knew it was meant to be the best accelerator in the world. It's based in Silicon Valley. It's had the most unicorns come out of it. And we sent off the application process. We actually used it as an opportunity to sharpen our pitch because it's quite extensive. So we didn't really think we would get in. And then so I know there were over 17,000 applications. And then we heard that we'd got the first interview, and that was amazing timing for us. But that's where the Dutch ecosystem actually really pulled through. And we met with 4 founders who were Dutch entrepreneurs who had been through the program. I think there's only been 8 startups from the Netherlands in the past 20 years who have been through the program. So they did mock interviews with us because it's the interview process is quite extensive. It's very, Vivek, you'll know from our past experience, precision questioning was good training for these mock interviews. You have 10 minutes of an interview with the panel of whether they decide if you're in or not. So these founders were hugely beneficial going through this process with us, with these mock interviews, giving us advice. So we went through the mock interview, and then we found out that we were in. So I think it's 1% that get in, and only then 1% of the whole batch is woman from the Netherlands, from Europe. So we're used to being the underdog, let's say. And once we were in, it's 3 months really intense. We've just finished it. 3 months intense program where they take you through all the different parts of kind of running a business, but more around product market fit and growth. And at the end, there's a demo day. So you need to hit all these targets every week on week growth. And then you pitch to about 1,000 plus investors on demo day to basically raise your seed round. But what was, we learned a lot. If I think of just the learnings from Y Combinator, We were really sharp with our focus, with our goals, with our targets and what we needed to do to get there. We're really sharp on our roles. So me focusing on the product market fit with the product, and Arusha really on the commercial and reducing the time to close, for example. And the other really amazing thing about YCombinator, not only with the knowledge, I mean, every week you meet with a company who has been through the program and been successful on a Zoom call, like Stripe, like Airbnb, like Twitch, for example. But our batchmates in the network there, learning from each other, going through this journey together. So it was a pretty amazing experience, exhausting. This year it was remote because of COVID, so we were working Silicon Valley time, so 6 p.m. to midnight every evening.
Wow.
For 3 months. Yeah. When you put YCombinator and then the investor calls around it. Yeah, so it was a very we learned a lot, and it really accelerated our thinking, I think. Yeah.
I bet. I mean, I think as you just described, it would have been an amazing experience going through the journey, tiring, of course, working with different time zone. But I think obviously sets you in the right direction of where you want to take off. What, if I could ask, what were the takeaways that you got out from this particular accelerator program that you feel would be very relevant as you start thinking about the future of your organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what I've learned is there's 3 things that make a startup successful. It's the team, it's product market fit, and it's growth. So those, and you need all of those to be aligned. Like if you have a good market but not a good team or product market fit, it's not going to work. If you have product market fit but not a great team, it's not going to work. So all of those 3 things are really important, and there's kind of 2 reasons that this is what YCombinator have taught us, have said that startups fail. One is there's a disagreement with the co-founders, which I'm very fortunate that Arusha and I we have a very, very strong relationship. It's a bit like we're family coming through this journey. And the other thing is not achieving product market fit, so not talking to your users enough. This build and they will come mentality. Like I know Airbnb, for example, their founders had 2 user interviews every week for years and years. We also learned you need to keep your customers close in the beginning, especially your first 100. So what we did, we've set up a direct Slack channel with the team leads of all of the customers that we have, so that we have direct contact helping them through the journey, capturing the questions. So we turn them into product features, for example. And then growth. So we got a sales coach through YC, who was amazing and is actually still going to continue work with us in various ways. But he really taught us how to make sales a repeatable process, which really we got 18 new customers in 10 weeks since launching, which was amazing traction for us. And Arusha is now closing sales on 1 call. We used to take months and months, so that kind of learning on, and that's really a sign of product market fit. Yeah.
Brilliant. For yourself, for your personal growth, how was that experience getting through the YCombinator and also going through that process of, as you said, the program is complete now. What was, obviously from you had some organization lessons and the learnings. How did you see your growth through that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of things from my growth. One is really sharp and clear and being efficient with your time. So we're now so good on setting targets, rallying the team around it, and making sure that we're hyper focused. Because in the beginning, there's so many things that you can be working on, and as a startup, there's a lot that needs to be done. So making sure we're all working together on the most important important parts has been one. Another personal element, so it has been very intense. And eating there's a saying in New Zealand, I don't know if in Australia, I don't know if it translates in Europe, but our team understand it now, where you say eat your own dog food. So Arusha and I both have to be really aware of our own well-being through this process and making sure we're keeping each other in check, recognising the signs, because it was a very intense process. The other thing I think for my own learning is everything, you go into this thinking it's kind of a fluke or good luck, or it's not actually. If you have processes, repeatable processes that you can take to scale, and you regularly listen to your customers, it's evident, that's based on data, and make decisions on that. That's how, and the same with sales, it's actually a repeatable process. I don't know why that was so surprising, but you see these kind of charismatic, and you think, it's all based on that individual. I mean, there's a lot of that, of course, but a lot of it is being very structured in the way that you approach things. Yeah, which is great to learn.
Brilliant. Before we talk about the hard parts of obviously going through the experience, I want to also get a little bit background on your journey. I think you mentioned about you're originally from New Zealand, and you moved to Amsterdam. Tell us a little bit journey before Quan. What were these key, I would say, dots that you connected to reach Quan?
Yeah. That's a good. So I'll start back from the beginning.
Go for it.
From New Zealand, but my father was in the military, so we moved. I mean, he's just retired after 10 years with the UN in Somalia. So we moved to a lot of different places. I mean, we lived in Egypt and Singapore and different places across New Zealand. So I know that and since then I've lived in 10 countries on the way to Amsterdam. So that's really instanced in a sense of adventure, and I know once I did a psychometric test of some sort, and I was in the top 1% for able to handle ambiguity. So I think that's something a bit to set the scene. I studied in New Zealand and then left straight away as soon as I could at 21 to London, where I worked for a private equity firm. Was my first job, my first kind of proper job, and it really made me realise what I didn't want to do, to be honest. But it was a good experience. And the global financial crisis happened, and I took a job as a stewardess on a super yacht and had 6 months traveling through Africa and that kind of thing. But then after that, I started working, which was really foundational, pivotal moment for me in my career. I worked for a company called New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. So it's a public-private partnership, and its mission is to help New Zealand companies be successful exporting. So I was in the professional services side of that, and I had a very amazing leader, my boss, David Downs. He was the CEO of Microsoft Asia, but he, for me, was the first real example of leadership, what it means to give feedback, coach, structure the teams properly. I was sort of his chief of staff, so really got to experience the strategy and the change management, and also he made sure I was upskilling myself with design thinking, with strategy, with Lean Six Sigma, with all that kind of stuff. And then that job took me to different places in the world, so US, London, Asia, and that was amazing, working with these amazing companies, trying to help them be successful, launching different services. So that was a really great place to cut my teeth and get such broad experience. They also put me through, when I was in London, supported me in my MBA in Edinburgh, which was also amazing. Then when I left NZTE, I moved to Amsterdam, and I was working as a freelancer with various startups. I even worked for the Estonian government for a while as a contractor in Estonia, helping them sharpen their customer-facing services. But I started in the startup where I took a sort of short-term role around being an innovation consultant, and I was 1 month in, and they said, "Can you be the CEO?" And I naively said yes, and that was probably one of my biggest learnings, especially of what not to do. I was very naive and inexperienced, but learned a lot. That startup ended up being acquired by Innoleaps. And after that, so that was a couple of years, and that was really, really tough, in terms of having cash flow issues, of all sorts of things, acquisitions that didn't happen, keep motivating a team through when it's so up and down. And then I came to the German unicorn, which is Zalando, as an executive, and that was really interesting. I was head of business and business development and operations. That was super interesting learnings as well, in terms of taking a product to deliver at scale, both from the data acquisition side, taking it through a process from our CTO. There was the way that it was structured to deliver at scale. So that was also amazing experience. And I feel like all of these things have actually led me to Quan. All of the skills that I've picked up along the way feels like it was a road that was bringing me here. And I'm really, the way that we are, what we're delivering in terms of our mission, but also the way that we're running Quan, we really believe in a sort of future-focused organisation with flexibility. And
I think one thing that, one thing that sticks with me with the arc of your journey is, as you said, dealing with ambiguity. And obviously the work that you're doing right now is obviously full of ambiguity. Nothing is like ready to be attacked. We know what we need to work with. So a lot of ambiguity comes with this role. What are the things that you think about when you have to deal with ambiguity in your journey so far, not just at Quan, but also elsewhere? What has been your reflections of figuring out through an ambiguity? What do you see yourself doing better in that perhaps other people who may be also in that situation of dealing with ambiguity could learn from?
That's a good question. So there's probably two answers to that. There's one from a Quan company perspective, and then there's one from a personal perspective. But they align. But because we went through this with Quan from the beginning. What are we going to build? And we're actually going through that right now with launching another part of our product. And there's a couple of things. It's trust the process. So we're very design thinking led. We have two amazing designers. So we collect user insights, we prototype, we test, we iterate. That's the other one. The other one is pivoting fast. I know with YCombinator, they taught us that quite often founders are so stuck on this idea, and they keep pushing it, although all the signs are telling them and the data is telling them that you need to pivot. So I think it's being able to pivot fast is the other thing, based on the data and the insights and what it's telling you. From a personal perspective, it's probably similar. I've trusted the process that it'll get me where I need to go. I've gone in. I think I go in without over-egging the expectations. I don't want to say I don't have any expectations, but I go in taking it for what it is, rather than what I expect it to be, and being able to pivot. Yeah.
No, I think this is such a important topic to kind of spend time on, because I think, as you said, that being able to live and also work in different countries with different cultures and setup, and also sizes of organization, I think allows you to build this repertoire of different ways of addressing ambiguity at different levels. If you have someone who is listening or watching this podcast and they may be in their formative years, maybe university, just graduating from university, or what would be your advice for them, especially around preparing themselves for dealing with this ambiguous world that we live in?
Yeah, that's a good question. The number one thing I would say, and it's really one of our values that we hold at Quan, is be curious. Be curious, be open, ask lots of questions, even if you think they're dumb questions, because they're not. There's no such thing as a dumb question. I think the other thing is understanding, and this is another thing we really do at Quan, self-awareness of the way you work and what you need and where your barriers are is really a part of the process, you know. I know, for example, you were talking about dealing with it as a leader. I know with different groups of people, I have to structure things differently to make it more comfortable for them. So some people need an agenda up front, for example, of what the workshop's going to be about so that they can have structure their thinking beforehand, mostly introverts usually, whereas extroverts prefer to build off each other in the session. So I think knowing, curiosity and building self-awareness of what you need and what works for you, what doesn't, and being vocal about that or being aware of it and setting the boundaries would be the advice.
So curiosity and build self-awareness.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I also want to double click on the part around, as you said, taking care of yourself and your well-being, as obviously you and your co-founder Arushi are running a well-being organization. How does that look like to an outsider? Like, for example, you being in the eye of the storm with respect to managing this chaos and ambiguity that comes with running an organization like this. How do you as a leader help work towards your own well-being, also kind of working with an organization which is solving the well-being problem for everybody else?
Yeah, so we consume our own product and we test a lot on ourselves. So we take the assessment, the well-being assessment. It measures 5 dimensions: the mind, meaning, self-fulfillment, social connectedness, and body. And we have 30 sub-dimensions and then 220 predictors underneath that. So the framework is it demonstrates the complexity of well-being and how it's all interconnected, but the depth. So we take the assessment regularly as a team, and we have sessions where we talk about it, and then we implement recommended solutions that we would do on the platform. From a personal perspective, it's always I'm so happy that it still remains relevant because your well-being changes all the time. So the last time we did the assessment, my personal life had completely plummeted. That had not been the case for me before, but it's because I don't have a personal life, because every evening I was with the YCombinator sessions. So the steps I took to address it was making sure that I got structured time for exercise. I went and visited my family in London and spent some time there, and then friends in Berlin and just took the meetings from there to make sure I was feeling more connected with people that I loved, for example. And Arusha is very self-aware with her kind of triggers. And we're both and it's great that we have those really open conversations with each other, because we can recognize when someone is triggered, and we laugh, we joke about that, we don't feed it. You know, if someone's in a state of a bit of a spin, you know, because they've been with something's gone off, we protect them, each other a little bit, and we make sure that you have the space that you need, and then we come out of it, we're like, oh yeah, you know, sorry about that, I was looping, or I was So that's how we and it comes back to the self-awareness and recognizing what you need and where your boundaries are, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a very nicely put. What I take away from here is recognizing, obviously, dog fooding, as you said, and which is a good thing that you already have a platform and a system that you could take advantage of, but also creating that opportunities and time for yourself where you can address some of the observations that you have as you build a self-awareness. I have a little bit of meta question here, more philosophical, especially with the work that you and your co-founder and your team is doing in Quan. What do you think are possibly the indicators that, people are becoming more, I would say, serious about thinking about well-being at work?
Yeah.
Is it the modern work style, the life, or was it purely COVID? What do you think are those micro and macro trends which are leading to people thinking seriously about well-being, not just at work, but off work as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So COVID definitely accelerated this thinking for sure, because people could no longer leave their home life at home. It was completely mixed, combined with things like the Great Resignation, and a huge increase in burnout. So companies are now, I read a stat recently, 84% of companies have increased their focus on mental health. So those are kind of the triggers. What we've found, so there's some really key learnings that we've found from a more in Quan perspective. So we've had more than 2,000 people take the assessment. What's scoring lowest by far across the sub-dimensions is burnout, stress at work, anxiety at work. We initially built Quan, and this is a lesson of pivoting. We built Quan where we wanted to help the individual employee, so they'd do the assessment and then would point them to like sleep stories or a headspace or a therapist, But because this is what's scoring low consistently, they're still going to burn out unless you address the underlying cause, which is ways of working. So we had to pivot, which has actually been one of our key differentiators, to delivering a service for teams and team leads. So teams, we now aggregate the results up to team level and then suggest interventions for the team, and we support the team leads through a 3-month journey on how to have these conversations with your team, how to implement these suggested interventions, because the team leads are really struggling. They're like, we know we need to do something, but we don't have the language, we don't have the tools. So that's been super interesting observation and learning that we've developed. In terms of kind of the problem that we're solving, so there's the meta of the Great Resignation, the increase in burnout, and the younger generations demanding more from the organisation. For companies, if you think of how they've treated wellbeing, they've treated it like wellbeing perks, but it's a really fragmented, ineffective market. It's very difficult for them to get a return on investment on it, and only 3% of offerings are actually evidence-based. So that for them is problems that we're trying to solve with Quan. So we first identify the need, we give with data and insights, and then we point to solutions that are evidence-based in a science-backed way, basically, where they can measure the effectiveness and the return on investment.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a very fair point, and I think one thing that also connects to me is how well-being, especially mental well-being, is also kind of a taboo subject in some cultures, right? It's not spoken about that openly. I have lived and worked in East Asia for long periods of time. I think they're also kind of slowly rising up to address some of the mental well-being situation, which I think you often hear, right? People working 18 hours or 19 hours a day, and most of them in an office all the time. And I think obviously there is a difference between how each culture and society addresses mental well-being and obviously physical well-being. How have you been through the experience of talking to customers and while building this product considered taboo of having these conversations, especially with the leaders and their employees?
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate that our ICP, our ideal customer profile, is between sort of 10 to 200, although we do have now a couple of 500 companies and one that's now 1,500, but they are digitally mature, tend to be scale-up, remote or hybrid English speaking. Those are the people that it's really resonating with, because they're really feeling a need for it's attention and attraction and retention is one of the main drivers for them. So and it all seems to be like they are really open-minded with these kind of conversations, or they have to be, I think, in order to get this talent on board. And you can also almost argue that the tech this kind of culture is a culture within itself. So, but what we have found is we're across, I think, 7 different countries or so, and it seems, because it's so personal to you and it's a self-assessment, it seems to resonate because it's not against some metric that we're setting, it's your own metrics with yourself. So, and then what you can do to improve. So far, I actually absolutely recognise there's different cultural variations, but so far we haven't hit so much of that yet.
That's fantastic. Let's steer back to the parts around hard parts of running an organization, if you can, and maybe obviously with the discretion and things that you can share. What has been the aspects which you found as obviously interesting challenge for you to navigate as you went through starting an organization in the midst of a pandemic, and also working on a problem which I still feel is still not mainstream? I think everybody's opening
we're category defining for sure. That makes it difficult.
Every other entrepreneur is either opening a delivery company or something these days. Fintech. So tell us a little bit about the journey through the pandemic, starting an organization and working on this space, especially what hard for you and challenging for you and your team to go through this, and maybe there'll be lessons there that we can take away for all of us.
Sure. Yes. So in terms of starting, we started the company during the pandemic, so we're completely remote. We've got team members in the US and across Europe we've never met each other, a lot of them. So we've got a team of 15 with some interns as well. Additionally, I think with the types of people that we have who they're really passionate about the cause, and B, this is how we started and this is what we know. So I don't think it was harder of going from completely working together to working remote. So we built up strong structures in place so that we could support that. So we do daily stand-ups, for example, we do team building, we do the team wellbeing sessions. So that actually hasn't been, other than ensuring with your own wellbeing that you get out and that kind of thing, that starting during the pandemic hasn't been as challenging as I would have thought. But what has been, and the reason why we could accelerate so fast is because of the pandemic. It was a bit of a catalyst for all of this to happen. But I think we're yet to see the real effects, to be honest. And now this is really important for companies to focus on. But what's been difficult for us, I think, like you mentioned, if you look at some of our peers in YCombinator, we've got a couple of things that are against us. We're women. Only 1% of women get funding in Europe and the US from VCs. We're in mental health. We're in HR tech. Those are all kind of from a investment world crosses a bit, or things that count against us. So we've had to work that much harder, I think, to get investment, which is kind of exhausting, But it also means that we are getting the right people that we want around us, and we're building for sustainable growth. It's not this bang and bust like you see of some of these others that are raising millions very early but don't have the substance in the team. We've got 4 PhDs on our team who are working on the framework to ensure that it's a sustainable business. What else has been hard? I mean, there's lots of things. I have to have a think. So the other key lessons that I've learned, it's really important that who you surround yourself with. And there are a lot of people attracted to the startup space, but we've got an incredible team. I mean, there's no way we could have done anything like this without the team that we have. So we're extremely fortunate for that. But also the people we surround ourselves with as advisors and the other founders, mostly, who have been through it, who have been steering the bottom of the barrel of running out of cash or 100 no's from investors. And they've been incredibly valuable, worth their weight in gold, these kind of advisors, I think. So that's been some big lessons. Another big lesson is really making sure that you're focused on the users, with understanding the needs, talking to them regularly. The first 100, that would be the kind of lessons, I think.
How hard was to do customer development in this process, especially understanding what customer needs are? Can you share a little bit about how was that process for you and your team?
Yeah, so we did in the beginning when we first built the framework and we were building out our MVP, we did 500 user interviews over the process. So we really, from both individual users, managers and buyers, and then we had, I think, 60 therapists and doctors and that kind of thing to validate. So that's been extremely informative that we're so user interview focused. We've really followed design-led processes where we build a wireframe, we prototype. We've done, going through this, so we built the assessment and then we had sort of some added on reports that we made it look like it all came together, but it didn't really. But to get out there kind of quick and dirty, to test it first and understand and then iterate. So I think that's continuously been our process, deep user research and building, testing and iterating throughout the whole process. And we're really proud of that, actually. I mentioned earlier our pivot to the team. The other two big pivots that we've learned as a result of this, one was the whole first idea of Quan was that we match individuals to therapists. And then we did some interviews and only 20% of the users actually wanted to be matched for therapists. The rest wanted a self-help, and then the companies didn't actually want to pay for it. So we would have that would have been fallen flat on its face. Another key learning that we've made is and it was actually a really good thing that we did. So we enabled companies to upload what they're already offering employees for wellbeing, so that you can point them to what the company's already offering. And that was super interesting to see what was used, what wasn't. The companies could get a bit of return on investment view, but we really saw where the gaps are. Like 63% of companies don't have anything that we work with. So that means we now know we need to build out an ecosystem to point to these companies to solutions that are effective, that's beyond Quan, for example. So just some kind of anecdotes of what that's meant.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Lucy, imagine we have, let's say, in the audience listening to this or watching this podcast, there are leaders who have been thinking about what can they do in their role to help their team and employees to have a better well-being at work. What is your message to them? What do you want them to think about? Obviously, there's a Quan part of it, but as general about well-being at work, what should they start up with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think one thing we see quite commonly is it's not the manager's role to solve the problems. It's that you're not going to solve someone's personal well-being problems, and nor should you, but it's creating the environment. You can openly talk about it, and especially in one-to-ones and beyond one-to-ones as a team, and then identifying as a team ways of working that are not working that you can fix. You know, if it's stress, if it's too high pressure around deadlines, for example, if there's too much ambiguity and you need more definition of the roles. So, but it starts with that mindset of listening and creating the environment, and having the language. I think that's what Quan, that's the number one thing that that managers appreciate about Quan is the insights, but then the language on how to have these conversations with their team. Yeah.
Fantastic. We are almost at the end of our conversation, and I think aspects that we talked about, I would think we could spin off few more podcasts from there. As we end, I think for me, it's interesting to see how you think about a desired end state of the world, where perhaps talking about and addressing well-being, both physical, mental, and spiritual, uh, is not an alien topic. How do you see Quan's role in that end state picture of where you're heading to?
That's a good question. So I'll reiterate our mission. Our mission is to place wellbeing at the heart of success. And that means that employees view wellbeing equally as important as financial measures or engagement measures or sales measures. That's what we're creating, really, is a movement towards that. And how we've been doing it, which has been interesting, is a bottom up. So team leads are the ones that are talking to us first that want this. So we're working with team leads and then creating enough of a movement within the organisation that then HR or whatever has to do something about it. But that's where it's going to start with, because they're the ones who are really feeling it and needing it.
Fantastic. Lucy, I deeply enjoyed this conversation. I know we had some hiccups in the beginning to get to the recording and everything, but I'm also super appreciative of the time that you gave me.
No, thank you so much, Vivek. And Vivek's also helped Quan a lot with, I've tapped on his shoulder for user interviews more than once.
It was a drop in the ocean for what you are doing.
Thank you. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time with you and to share my story. And I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out and connect, and I'm really happy to do so. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lucy.